Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. My name is Todd Nesloney, and I'm your host. I'm an elementary principal in Texas and also author of the book Stories from Web, with which this whole series is based after. Each week, I seek to bring you different people in my life who have inspired, encouraged, or challenged me in some way with what they're doing with their lives and their stories that they have to tell, in hopes that after you hear some of their story, you'll be brave enough to share some of yours. I am thrilled this week to have my special guest and good friend, Adam Dovico, on with me today. Adam, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are?
What's up? How you doing, Todd? Well, I guess first and foremost, I'm your friend, so that's the most important part about me. Todd and I are cool, so that's the starter. But I am a career educator, born and raised in New Jersey, and then came down south, so I can say y'all and use guys in one sentence. We make it could be speak multiple languages there. I started teaching as a fifth grade teacher in North Carolina, and went to a couple schools as a fifth grade teacher, then went down to a really cool place called the Ron Clark Academy. I got a chance to teach there. And in addition to teaching, I got to travel around the country doing professional development. Got to see education from all different kinds of lenses in schools, which was really awesome. From there, I got to be a visiting college professor at my alma mater, Wake Forest University. So that was really cool, going back and being a professor at a school where I taught at, or where I went to, I should say. And I'm now a principal at a Title I elementary school in North Carolina again. So moved a couple places, but had this really cool journey along the way, and I've written a couple books in the process, and had some fun. And got to meet you.
Here's a jack of all trades. You do a little bit of everything.
Do a little bit of everything. Nothing good. Not very great at anything, but a little bit of everything.
I disagree. Yeah. Well, did you always know that you wanted to be in education, Adam?
Yeah, I did. I was one of those dorky kids. When I was like 5 or 6 years old, I used to make quizzes and tests for my younger brother. He's 2 years younger. And when I made them, I'd make him whatever I was learning in school. And when I made them, I'd make him take it because I was older, so he had to take it by default, or I'd beat him up. And then I would grade them with those Mr. Sketch. Remember those Mr. Sketch like smelly markers, the ones that you could smell? So I always used the cherry red ones. I think my teacher had the same ones. So I would make him take it, and then I would grade it. And so I think that was my first student. And then from there, it just kind of blossomed, I guess. But every job I've ever had always involved kids. I was like camp counselor, referee, babysitter, tutor. I've never had a job that didn't involve like kids. So I frankly have no other skills, but I can go into the kid business pretty well with working with kids. So yeah, always kind of known.
So, you mentioned you always knowing you wanted to be an educator, but you in school yourself, did you always love school and have a great environment there, or was that something that you struggled with at all?
I actually did okay. I was like a solid B student, pull out some A's sometimes. So I played school well, I'd like to think. Was pretty low key, had some friends, pretty respectful. Interestingly enough, though, when I was in high school, so I went to public school for first like 10 years, and then my sophomore year of high school, I don't know, I just kind of decided I wanted to try something different, and so I got a chance to go, luckily, to a private school near my house, and finished up my last 2 years there. But it was really interesting getting to see kind of both the public and private school realm as a high schooler and a student, because it's two totally different worlds. And I did fine in both. Did pretty well in both, but they're just so different. And I think that set me up well for later on when I started teaching, because I've taught at both kinds of schools. I've taught at very suburban schools. I've taught at very Title I schools. So, I think those personal experiences, helped me out for later on in life.
I think that you're exactly right. All those things kind of play into what you're doing. So, you taught for a few years in North Carolina, and then how did this whole opportunity to go teach at the Ron Clark Academy even hit your radar?
So I was teaching in Charlotte, and my principal at the time sent me and a few other teachers. I was kind of like a curriculum coach at the time at the school I was working at. And so she sent a team of us. There were like maybe 5 or 6 of us that went down and was a guest there, one of the thousands that they have every year. And I got back, this was in maybe March or April, and my school that year was actually closing in Charlotte. It was a school that was disbanding. So, I mean, I was going to have to find a new school anyway. And so I got back after the trip to Atlanta, and I looked on the website just because, I wanted to learn more about the school. And I saw that they were hiring for the next year. They were looking for a teacher. And I was like, honestly, what the heck? I mean, nothing to lose. You can't get something if you don't try it. So I applied. I sent down a resume, a portfolio, a video. And within literally 1 week, like a week from the day I sent it, I was down in Atlanta interviewing in person and got the job that day. So life changed really quickly. And luckily, I have a pretty supportive wife that followed me down there. But it was a whirlwind. It literally happened so quickly, and it was exciting.
So you were there for a few years. What do you feel like is the biggest thing you learned about yourself by taking that experience on?
I think that the biggest experience that I learned was that education doesn't have to look the way that it always has. And there's nothing wrong with trying new things, pushing the limits, breaking barriers, be the trendsetter. And, Ron and Kim, they do such a good job of being trendsetters. And, I knew I wanted that for my own school one day. Even when I was working down there, I knew I wanted to be a principal one day. And, now that I've had a chance to, I've tried my best at my school. And, it's a public school, Title I public school. So, yeah, naturally, there's going to be some obstacles and hurdles, as you know. But, I mean, that doesn't mean you have to not do stuff and not figure out how to make it happen. So I think, yeah, the biggest thing I learned was don't listen to the naysayers and make it happen.
It's so funny listening to you talk about your journey and getting there, because it's so weird me thinking about, yours and my relationship and how that's where I met you. And you probably don't remember, but that's where I met you when I went as a visiting educator to RCA. And to think that after all these years, now not only are we friends, but we're like presenting together and doing this kind of stuff together. It's so weird thinking back in the day going, I remember going to RCA and being like, oh my gosh, these teachers are all amazing. They're people who I want to be like, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I like get to hang out with one of those people that I get to go see, and he's totally just like everybody else.
And now you just realize, oh man, he's just chopped liver.
Well, during that time or around that time, you also released your first book, Inside the Trenches. And that's another part where I feel like I really got to know you before I got to know you in person. And I love that book so much, and the stories you shared throughout it. Where did that kind of vibe to want to write that book? Because you also self-published it, didn't you?
I did. And the funny part is it never started as a book. I was traveling around the country doing professional development for the Ron Clark Academy at schools and conferences and speeches and all that kind of stuff. And so I was living on the road out of hotels and in rental cars and airplanes. So it gets kind of lonely when you're by yourself that much. And so I would just start kind of typing away on my computer as I was flying or staying in a hotel about what happened that day, or just random thoughts in my head about teaching. And it kind of turned into a blog, which turned into kind of writing some ideas more concisely. And eventually I realized I got a lot of stuff down here. And so I just kind of organized it a little bit more and learned about the self-publishing realm, and just kind of put it out. And it was really fun. It was low pressure because ultimately it was just my own thoughts that I got to put down. So there was never any pressure to, do anything fancy with it, because it was just kind of my own opportunity to put something together.
And then you and Abe Hedge just recently released your second book that you co-wrote with him, and that is Limitless School. Where did that idea come to want to write another book? But this one focuses primarily on the first one I kind of look at as like part of it's Adam's story. It's like it's your life, your experiences, and things you learned along the way. And Limitless School is quite different. So if you had to describe Limitless School for our viewers or listeners, how would you describe it?
So that one's about school culture. Limitless School is really about building that school culture from the perspective of all the stakeholders. There's a lot of books out there that focus on school culture and building school culture from like, this is how you do it as a principal, this is how you do it as a teacher, or, this kind of singular view. And Abe and I wanted to look at it from all the perspectives because, I mean, in our experience, it takes everyone. It's not a single person's job. It truly does take every stakeholder. And so we look at it from all these different perspectives: the parents, the superintendent, the teachers, the families, the students, and realize that it's not like a one person job. It's not a single day of culture that you're building. It's a process. And the cool part is Abe and I wrote it both from our, we both have kind of some cool, unique experiences, but we wrote it ultimately before both of us became principals. But now that both of us are principals, we've used it as this blueprint for our own schools. And so as teachers are like, hey, Adam, what's next on the agenda? I'm like, read the book and you'll kind of see. I mean, it lays out the things that that Abe and I truly believe in.
I love the book, and I love the whole Rubiks Cube tie-in as well. And I think it's so cool that you even got like permission to use a real Rubiks Cube image and things like that. So it's so cool the way you put all that together. Why did you want the idea of a Rubiks Cube with it? Where did that come from?
So it was funny. You mentioned before, like writing a second book. I always vowed like I was not going to write another book after the first experience. I know you've said that a couple times now. And I don't know, you need time in between these things. But after, it had been a couple years since Inside the Trenches, and Abe calls me one day. He's like, hey, I've got this idea. And I don't think he was necessarily asking me to write it with him, but I don't know. He was sharing this idea. He's like, hey, man, I've got this idea. It's got a cube in it, maybe like a Rubik's Cube, and it turns and it's like different pieces. And at the time, we really had no idea what the book was going to be about, other than we had this idea of a Rubik's Cube. We thought it was really cool. So we thought about what our backgrounds and experiences and talents are, and kind of what we are passionate about. And it is school culture, because both of us had worked in schools that really thrived off of that piece of schools. So we decided school culture, what it was going to be about. And you know this, but I'm really obsessed with acronyms. I love acronyms, and
Yes,
I do a lot of them. And so we knew we wanted to do something with a word that would translate into the book title, which would work with the cube. And so we're like, all right, so there's nine pieces of the cube. We were like 6 sides, 9 pieces, 9 little squares on each side. We're like, all right, what do we do? And so funny, this is insider information here. I don't know if I've ever even told anyone this, but Limitless School Limitless was not our original word. We were going to use, I think, illuminate. I think it was the word illuminate. It was another 9-letter word. I think illuminate was it. And we were trying to figure out like, what would it stand for? Because we had all these ideas, like what goes into a cool and effective school culture. And we were just struggling with making illuminate work. So then we were like, all right, what's another word that like you just keep going and school culture keeps, building and building. We're like, limitless, naturally. Limitless never ends. So I don't know, stuck with that and made it work, and here we are.
I love that. Well, you talked a little bit how after teaching for a little while at RCA, you then went and started doing some PD for them and traveling around the country. And I know that you still do a lot of speaking, whether that is on your own, you do keynotes and workshops and things, and people can go to your website for that information. But you also do things like Get Your Teach On and other organizations like that. Did you ever see yourself as someone who would be out there sharing outside the classroom? And how did that even come to be for you that you would want to take that risk?
I guess I've always loved being on stage, not in the actor kind of way. I can't sing, I can't dance, so it's not that kind of stuff. But I've always in high school, I always ran for student government and all those positions and stuff. So I've never been afraid to be on stage in front of people. But I guess I never realized that I would have enough information. I never thought that people would actually care enough about what I had to say to let me stand in front of you and talk and share and converse about education. And it's just turned out to be a really cool opportunity, and people give me that chance, and it's been really neat. I never thought I'd be doing that in that form though, so I love it.
Is there something that you found you've really learned about yourself through speaking and sharing with others?
Yeah, I'd say mostly that we're in it together. Because I mean, when I speak, I'll share some of the failures and struggles that I have. It's not all like hunky dory stuff. Especially ever since becoming principal, I found my failure stories have really increased a lot. And so when I go out and, when you and I are speaking, with Get Your Lead On and stuff, I've really found that sometimes I guess the best reactions are the ones where we are like, man, this failed.
Mhm.
And people love that. So I guess what I found out about myself is that like I'm not the only one failing out there, and it's I guess rest assured, and it's self assuring
You know,
that
I
you know
think you're exactly right with that. I think about how you and I both go out there and share our failures as well as our successes, and you hear all the time things like, "Oh, everybody fails. Oh, people make mistakes all the time." But as you go out there and you start sharing with people from all over the place, you really bring that to home of saying that it feels good to share the hard parts just as good as it feels to share the good parts, because it reminds you that you're not alone in the struggles that you're dealing with. And one of the things that I know so many of my guests that I have on we talk about is just that struggle of dealing with doubt or feeling like, okay, today I feel like the biggest failure and now I'm rethinking everything. Do you find yourself struggling with that sometimes too?
Yeah, I mean, there's always that self doubt. Like as a principal, and you and I are both kind of in the same boat. We became principals without being an assistant principal, so we both kind of got thrown into this world that you go through graduate classes, and you're like, yeah, I'm ready for it, and in some ways you are,
Yeah.
but no matter how prepared you are, that first time you get yelled at by a parent or the teacher is just super upset. Yeah, I mean, how do you react? And you grow from each experience. And I mean, I even like this morning was a tough one with some of the conversations in my school improvement team meeting. And like 2 years in now, I'm like, man, like I just felt like, man, I can't win here.
Yep.
But you grow from it, you learn from it, you reflect, and you're honest with yourself, and you're like, yeah, I can make it better. And that's what I try to do after each scenario is like, how can I improve this, or how can I make it better?
Yep. What is one of your favorite parts that you've had so far about being a school administrator?
I think the impact of change. When you're a classroom teacher, you can definitely have that impact on your classroom. So you have your 20, 30 students, and you can definitely feel that impact in your own classroom. But as the principal, I mean, having that impact on the entire school, 600 students for me, that's really cool. Being able to feel like, yes, like I have a system that I put into place and others are helping me carry out, and the students are enjoying, and that's really cool to have. I think that gratification of knowing that you've impacted an entire school,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think that's the coolest part of being a principal.
Well, one thing I want to share with our viewers that I know you're not going to talk about or brag about, but it's one of the things that, there's a lot of things that I really respect you for and admire that you do. But one of the things I love about you, Adam, is that what the walk or the talk that you do, you follow it up with walking behind it. And what I mean by that is, you talk a lot about building relationships, making change, doing things for the betterment of the kids. And you work at a school where you have a deaf and hard of hearing unit.
Mhm.
And y'all serve a lot of those kids there. And what I love is when you became principal there, you knew little to no sign language at all.
It's
And
zero.
when you found out that you were going to be having students that had different kind of levels of hearing deficiencies, you took it upon yourself. Nobody asked you to, nobody made you feel like you had to, but you took it upon yourself to not only take that initiative to learn sign language, but to go in and use it with the kids, even when you weren't very good at it, to put signs up at your school that signed out in the different letters. And so far as even going to deaf and hard of hearing events and taking your son with you, why did you feel like it was that important for you to immerse yourself in that? Because I know some people and are going to look at that and go, well, you've only got 10, 20 kids there out of 700, and you're going to put all this effort in to communicate, to learning a whole new language just to serve those kids. Why was that so important to you? Because I think it's very admirable.
Well, I appreciate it, and it's one of my favorite parts of the school. Um, I remember going when I've been, I've traveled in addition to around the country, around the world, and I've just been in so many scenarios and situations where I didn't speak the language that I was in the, in the presence of. And it's hard. I mean, I don't know Japanese, and I try to learn a few words of it there. Learned a few words of German in Germany, and you try to. I'm a big cultural guy. I love learning about different cultures, and the deaf community is a culture. And I think being able to learn about the deaf community is something that interests me, and I think really is intriguing and just so neat. And so I took it upon myself to make sure that they are not marginalized, that this is a real part of my school and something that we are all going to celebrate together, because that's really what it is. It's making sure that we celebrate these students. And and yes, I
That's
do.
why I love more than just saying you were going to celebrate those students. You actually got out there and got involved with them to learn it and put forth that energy. Because at our age, it's not easy to learn a new language, regardless if it's a verbal language or a
Right.
physical language. And did you have any of the kids or parents made any comments about the effort that you put in to learn?
Yeah. Sometimes I'm friends with a lot of them on Facebook, so they'll share some of our posts, and they've been so kind and generous about, just recognizing what we're doing at the school for their children, and which is really neat. And man, you're right. It is hard learning a new language, as an adult. And I I've learned a lot, but man, I was actually just today at dismissal, I was talking to one of the parents. So, many of the deaf students have deaf parents as well. So I was trying my best to communicate with one of the moms today because there were no interpreters around. And we had, I'm gonna notch it off as a conversation. I think we had a conversation, and hey, I'll take it as a win. Now I can't share what it is, but I have I think a really cool thing coming up. What my interpreters are helping me with it, so
I can't wait.
I'm crossing
I
my
hope
fingers
you're
it
using that
works.
not just for our viewers, but also for me, because I don't know what you're talking about
Yeah,
either.
you don't. No,
You're already
I haven't told
persuaded.
anyone, so
So,
it's I'm nervous and excited.
I bet. Well, I love to, and still going in with this, when we do our Get Your Lead On session, you share this beautiful story of not only learning the language to help all the kids at your school feel involved and like they can be a part, but you also find ways to encourage those kids who, like, you have a student leadership team at your school, and not every kid may feel like they have the correct qualities to be on that team. And what I love about the work that you do is that you really find those kids that have the leader in them, but may not feel it yet. Whether it is a physical disability, a language barrier, a hearing barrier, a self esteem barrier, and you really work to grow that in them. And I know some of that comes from your time at RCA and seeing the power in empowering the kids. But what is one of the coolest things that you have seen come from your time as a principal that you are really proud of the work? What is one thing you're really proud of what you've done over the last 2 years? I
I
know you
think,
probably have several things, but
well, I personally, my baby, like if you had to ask, like, what's the thing that like is just really mine? It's my ambassador program. It's the thing you just talked about. It's like that student leadership thing. I call them my ambassadors, and I just put so much time and energy into this group of my fifth graders. It's a small group of fifth graders who try out for this leadership position that I call ambassadors, and they're my team. They do tours, they do community events with me, they do meet and greets. They do it all. And they also do trainings. This morning, actually, I just put it up on Instagram, like right before we started. I just happened to walk upon one of my ambassadors this morning as I was walking down the hallway. One of their jobs is to train the kindergarten through fourth graders on how to be a better greeter, classroom greeter, because that's a job we have in every one of our classrooms. And they do it in kind of those odd times of the day, before school, after school. I mean, just kind of little 5-minute snippets that they can find during the day. And I just happened to be walking up on one of them doing a training with two of the kindergartners. And they just started kindergartners because they've been working their way down through the grade level. So they're working on kindergartners this month. And it was my first chance to see them working with these little 5 and 6-year-olds. And it was the coolest thing. They looked like adults. They truly, my ambassador, 5th grade ambassadors, they looked like adults working with these kids. And it was just the most fulfilling thing. And so I think my ambassador program is something I'm just so proud of. And, I like seeing it when other schools try it out. And I think it could be a game changer for schools.
I love that. And what people may not know about you and I, Adam, is we are very competitive. And so
There
a
we
lot
are.
of things that I do at my school, I'm like, we're doing this because Adam did it, and we're going to do it too because I saw how awesome it was. And so, even at our school, we've taken things like that you've done. And so what I love about that is I think it's a great testament to the impact that you are having as an administrator and as a leader and as somebody on social media. And that's one of the things that we talk about all the time of why it's important to be out there sharing your story, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because there are people all over who don't even tell you half the time they're watching and learning from it, but they are. And there's just countless things that I, as an administrator, have taken from you and always given you credit because I think you're absolutely brilliant. But I think it's just a cool testament to the power of getting out there and sharing.
Well, I've got payback for you. I'm stealing one of your things next week. I haven't told you about that. I haven't told you yet, but I'm stealing
That
one of
makes
your
me
things
nervous.
next week. I'll give you credit. Don't worry.
Well, one of the questions that I always like to end on when we do these conversations is, what is something that you wish more people knew or understood, education or not?
Let's see. Well, so I'll be honest, I'm not the most interesting person with my background. I had kind of a pretty typical upbringing, but I'll share a story about my wife Jacqueline. So, and it has helped me. It's a story about her, but it has helped me as an educator because it's relative. So when she was in middle school, in 6th grade, her dad died in a plane crash, one of those like famous plane crashes that you see on TV, in the news and stuff. And so she lost her dad like the first week of middle school. And then a year and a half later, her mom caught pneumonia and ended up passing away. And so within under 2 years, as a middle school student, she lost both of her parents. And I mean, middle school is already tough enough on people, but to then lose both your parents in a matter of 2 years, that's hard. And yes, there's people that are there for her and are encouraging, but there were also a lot of mean people, some mean kids who kind of rubbed it in, and people who weren't supportive. And so, the relative part is, as an educator now, there's kids going through the same exact thing. I, we've both gone through students who lose family members and parents and siblings, and it's a very real thing. So having that experience through my wife has it's just given me perspective on how to be a better educator and how to be there for kids who need it.
I think that is so important. I think that's the perfect way to end this conversation is, the whole idea of getting to know your kids and understanding their stories too, so that you can connect with them on a deeper level, because like I always say, you can't reach their head until you reach their heart, kind of thing.
Right.
And I think it's too important for our listeners to hear that from the perspective too of not forgetting your colleagues either, because it's super important that you learn their stories, because just like your kids are going through so many things, so are the people around you. Adam, I've told you before, and I don't just say it on camera, but I admire you and your work so much. I have for years. And you are one of those people in my life that I'm like, I really get to call like Adam my friend. Like I get to text him or I'll send him an email. And I get like when you wanted to come present with me, and I was like, what? Really? And then every time we present together, I'm like, I'm presenting with Adam Dovico. And I know you don't think you're like all that, but I think that you are just fantastic. And I appreciate you and the work that you're doing, and just really celebrate you and sharing everything online so those of us can learn alongside of you. So thank you for being an inspiration to not only so many, but to me as well.
Well, the feeling is mutual, and a day wouldn't go by if I didn't get texts from you and back and forth. So we keep each other alive.
That's right. That's right.
And motivated.
And thank you so much for everybody who listened or watched today to another episode. I hope that Adam's story and experiences have inspired you to get out there and be brave enough to tell your story. Remember, you can check out this episode as well as any of the previous episodes on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, or right here on Facebook. Remember to get out there and tell your story because every story matters. Have a good night, everyone.